Hey, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name's Christina Kent, and I'm a fine artist based out of San Francisco. In this video, I wanted to share my reaction as a professional fine artist, as someone who makes a career doing fine art, to some recent headlines that I saw that were kind of shocking. So this past week, I saw a bunch of headlines about this robot named Ada, an artificially intelligent robot who was said to be able to make paintings on her own. And not only that, but in the past week, one of her paintings sold at auction for over $1 million. As a fine artist, I felt a lot of mixed emotions when I read about this. On the one hand, I felt a lot of anger and frustration and even some fear. But on the other hand, I also felt a lot of wonder and curiosity and excitement. And I found myself asking, is this just a gimmick or is this a sign of something real, something important that I need to be paying attention to? Because honestly, in the past, I felt like AI art, okay, it's interesting. It's problematic in a lot of ways, but it kind of seemed like it was mostly affecting digital artists and artists working in the animation industry. And so kind of as a fine artist, I felt like I could almost ignore it for a little bit. But now it seems like that time has passed and I really need to take a look at what's going on. And the other thing with this robot is that they assigned it a gender. They gave it a name, Ada, and they call it a her, and they made it look like a human woman, at least her face and part of her body, which I have really mixed feelings about. Like, the optics of it feel really gimmicky, but at the same time, it does grab people's attention. It grabbed mine. So, maybe that was their goal. So first I want to dive into the question, is this Ada robot making art? Is it just a gimmick or is it a sign of something bigger? And I think to explore that further, we first need to do a quick overview of how AI art works today. If you're not super familiar with programs like DALL-E or Midjourney, these are programs that allow you to make AI art, which you've probably seen a lot of. Honestly, recently I was searching for paintings by Joaquin Sorolla on Google, and one of the first search results was AI paintings. Same thing with John Singer Sargent. These things are everywhere. If you go on Instagram, you see them too. I feel like AI art is now permeating all aspects of the art world. And the way that effectively these algorithms work is that they take a bunch of images from a training data set, usually images scraped from the web, and then they run an algorithm. They do some complex thing that I don't understand. But basically, they find a way to take all the information from these images and then they map them into this multidimensional space using hundreds, sometimes even thousands of variables to map these images in space and make sense of them to the algorithm. Then we as humans can give the program a prompt, something like dragon flying over San Francisco, and then using our prompt, the algorithm will navigate to the part in this multidimensional space that corresponds to that prompt, and then it'll return the image from that space. Now, I think this is a big oversimplification. Because of some complexities that I don't understand, you never get the same image for the same prompt. So there is some sort of kind of randomness going on there, but for what I understand, this is the basic idea. A great example of this, and an example of how the art world has been embracing AI art, is this work of art called Unsupervised by Refik Anadol. This was a piece that exhibited at the MoMA recently, and it was this giant installation. It was a huge screen where an algorithm had mapped all of the artwork from the MoMA's collection, so thousands of works of art, of modern art, and then it had created this space, and then basically, from my understanding, the art piece itself was just showing what was the visual output of navigating through that space. And I thought that this was an interesting idea. I thought it was pretty cool. Some people likened it to a lava lamp, or as Jerry Saltz said, it was a very expensive screensaver, and I can understand that criticism too. But overall, I thought it was a pretty cool exercise. At the same time, I find myself asking, is it art? And what does it mean to make art? On the one hand, it does feel, maybe if it is art, maybe it's kind of derivative. I think the fact that we map a bunch of images that have already been created, and then we're just navigating within that space, to me, that suggests that you're not really adding anything new, but you're just kind of remixing what has already been done. Now, some people suggest that that's what humans are already doing. That's what human artists do. They just take other influences and then they remix them in new creative ways. So if that's what you think art is, then yeah, I think that this exhibition or this piece and a lot of AI art is art. But if you think, as I do, that humans not only remix their influences, but then also add new information, add something new that would be outside of this training data set, then I think you could make the argument that like, yeah, what this AI is doing, it's not really art, or maybe it's art, but it's very derivative. I think that even if AI's work is sort of derivative in this way, the fact that it is exploring this huge multidimensional space and that it can create these really cool things that we've never seen before, to me, that is pretty awesome. It's a cool exercise. And I also like the idea of even just mapping the space of human creativity by these algorithms. Like, I think that that's really fascinating. And there's a lot that we can understand about ourselves as humans through learning more about and exploring this process. But I do think that human artists are doing more than just remixing. For example, I've seen many still life paintings of oranges, and when I go to paint a still life of oranges, I'm not just remixing those previous paintings that I'm seeing, but I'm actually adding something new, because no one has painted oranges the exact way that I see them on this particular day with my particular experiences. Like, I'm bringing my life experiences and my emotions and my feelings and the particular orientation of reality on that day to that new piece. And I feel like maybe it sounds minor, but I feel like that is saying something new. And as far as I understand, algorithms like Midjourney and DALL-E, they don't have new experiences like that. They just have their training data sets. So I don't think that they can make that new addition, at least not right now. So now let's go to this new AI robot. Is it a gimmick or is it something more profound? So to understand this, I think we need to know how Ada works and how that compares to other AI models. So from my understanding, Ada basically takes visual input through cameras and then runs that through some sort of algorithm and then turns that into output that it is then able to paint onto a canvas. However, when I tried to dig deeper into that to figure out like what is the algorithm that she's using, what sort of influences is she getting, I was having trouble finding information about the algorithm that translates her visual imagery into the work that we see on the canvas. To me, the painting almost looks like kind of like a glitchy output of a camera that was looking at multiple views. So my question is, what went into this algorithm? Did they evaluate the style of a bunch of different artists and then try to sort of map that onto these real life things that the robot is seeing in the world? Like, that part to me is very unclear. And I think the more guidance that is given in the algorithm, the less impressive it seems that this robot is making any paintings. In an article from The Guardian, they said that Ada generates ideas through conversations with members of the studio, which to me leaves the human collaborator role a bit ambiguous. In an article by Eleonora Lima that talks about how a lot of the human impact or the human role was hidden in Ada's process, she also mentions that in previous works, Ada actually created the images, but then they were digitally printed, and then they had a human artist go and actually do the painting or paint on top of the printed image. So I feel like, I'm not sure if they're still doing that. This was from a couple years ago, but it seems like if that's the case, like, that's definitely worth mentioning. So the fact that there seems to be a lot of human collaboration, both in designing an algorithm that may be providing a lot of guidance, also choosing the subject matter and choosing the color palette, and maybe even doing some of the painting themselves, like, that makes me feel like this is kind of more of a gimmick than a revolutionary technology. At the same time, I imagine that it's not going to be too long before we actually have a robot that is pretty much able to autonomously be able to create things that look like art. And I think that having a humanoid robot do this, it is a big step from just having a program on your computer do it. Because a humanoid robot, it can pretty much mimic my creative process, which is I go out into the world, I walk along the streets of San Francisco, I look for things that inspire me, and then I go home and I paint those things and I sort of interpret them through my own lens and paint them onto the canvas. And if we have a humanoid robot who has sensors, who has cameras, can't they also walk around, look for visual stimuli, and then run it through some algorithm, some lens of their own, and make a painting? Initially, I want to say no. Like, I want to think that, no, that's something that's very unique and human. Like, to me, inspiration, it feels like this mysterious and even spiritual process that I feel like AI and any sort of artificial intelligence just can't grasp. After all, AI is just operating some algorithm that's running some optimization function. But to counter that, I think the AI might look at my process and tell me, well, you're going out into the environment and then you're just running some biological optimization process. And just because you don't understand it doesn't mean that it's any more special than the process that the AI is doing. I think one of the amazing things about human art is that it's based on our experiences. It's based on things we've seen, things we've felt, emotions that we've experienced. But if you have a humanoid robot who's going out into the world, maybe they don't feel emotion, but they can still experience things, or, they can still sense things. They'll have sensors, they'll have cameras. Like, to me, that seems like maybe they can have an experience. And if they're sensing and responding to the world, could they make art like humans? So this brings me to the question, what is the role of humans in this world as AI is becoming more advanced and as we're moving towards this future where we might have, artificially intelligent, human-like robots who can make art? I do think that if we get to a point where we have artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence, we're going to have AI artists making art. But at the same time, I think there will always be a role for human artists as well. I don't think that AI art should be ignored. I think it's a fascinating exercise. And honestly, if we create like super intelligent AI, I'm fascinated to see what sort of art they might make. But at the same time, I love art because of the human connection. I feel like art is the way that we as humans are making meaning out of our world. And to me, it's an inherently human process. AI robots can act like humans, they can talk like humans, they can perfectly simulate being a human, but they will always be fundamentally different. And I think that paradoxically, the improvements in technology might even result in a stronger desire for art made by humans and things made by hand. The art critic Ben Davis noted that as technology advances, humans can feel a lot more alienated from our own world. And so that actually increases the value of art that's made by hand, that's connected to a real human, a real place. And I see this reflected in my own art and in my own career. My desire to make paintings is really grounded in my desire to connect more with the world around me. And when I see other artists making art with the same sensitivity, it helps me feel more grounded and more connected to the world. So while I think this Ada robot is a bit overhyped, I do think that it raises a lot of really interesting questions for artists and society in general to consider. I think the future of the art world is going to be a combination of human artists making their work, of super intelligent AI making their own art, and then also of this whole gray space of a collaboration between humans and AI. And while I find this Ada robot artist to be kind of gimmicky and the over $1 million paid for her painting to be absolutely absurd, I do think that I think the goal of their project was to raise awareness about the impacts of AI on our society and on art and creativity. And in that way, they were successful. So to kind of sum up my thoughts on this, I think that AI art is definitely not going away, and we're going to see just more and more advances over time. Already in just the past few years, we've seen huge advances in how much AI art is changing and its capabilities, and I think we can expect that to continue. But at the same time, I think there's always going to be a strong need for human artists and art. Because after all, art is how we make meaning out of the world, and art is how we connect with each other as humans. So I think that there's always going to be a role for humans in that. And I haven't talked much about the economic impacts of this, which I think are going to be huge and disruptive. I think that there are a lot of other videos and people who've talked about that. So I'm going to leave that aside here because that is the topic for a whole other video. But it's also just very much worth noting that this is a huge disruption, not just for artists, but AI is going to be disrupting all industries. And I hope that we as a society can navigate all these changes with grace and prudence and also curiosity, because I think there's a lot of potential pitfalls, but there's also a lot of opportunity and exciting new territory that we can explore. So anyway, that's what's been on my mind regarding this in the past week, and I think my thoughts are going to continue to develop on this. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If any interesting questions come to mind, I'd love to hear them. And as always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for supporting this channel and making these videos happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.